So the area of education is an interesting one to study from the perspective or on the issue of federalism, because it's really the perfect example for how an issue that's squarely within the purviews of the states according to the 10th Amendment can still be greatly impacted by the federal government. And that's primarily through the manipulation, for better or worse, with federal dollars. And, the authors spoke to a range of different ways that they do this in terms of, different policies such as No Child Left Behind or Common Core, standardized testing, and how that kind of translates into a top-down form of control in the issue or in the area of education that may not be suitable for all locations. It seems to be almost like a home rule issue, sort of, but more for the states. And it's a particularly important issue because, as the authors indicate, 27 cents of every state and local tax dollar is actually spent on education. And while the federal share or the dollars that are expensed is very small, they actually say it's only about 10% of what the state spends it comes from the federal level. They still have a lot of input and control over the policies and the directions that the states take. And one of the interesting areas that I thought and I wanted to focus on was the issue of standardized testing, because I think everybody's aware that it's a very politically contentious issue. It's been in the news. It's been an issue that has been around for decades now. And so I thought it was an important issue to look at in terms of the state and federal relationship, because it's really a way, it's been used as a way to identify underperformance and measure performance, and of course that's according to some standard that somebody determined somewhere based on whatever is determined to be important at the time. So, and that typically involves value judgments, and that's been particularly problematic in the United States. One of the main criticisms of this is that number one, standardized testing sort of robs students of a richer educational experience, because teachers are sort of teaching for the test, and so that they tend to miss out on other areas of education like the arts and other things. But I think one of the more problematic issues when it comes to standardized testing is that it does, because it reflects a value judgment in how the standards are determined. These tests tend to lead to cultural and ethnic biases, and that's particularly problematic because not only are you not getting a fair read on really the effectiveness of the educational system, but you're also creating a system that tends to disadvantage certain cultural groups based on really what could be argued to be arbitrary standards. And I think it's one of the reasons why it's been so persistent, standardized testing, is that I think we kind of fall into sort of what I call the gambler's dilemma. And that's, we've put so much effort and put so many resources into it that we keep chasing it, and we keep hoping for a different outcome. And it's sort of like the gambler that gets into debt, and he keeps thinking that his luck is gonna change, but he keeps going more and more into debt. And, I think we fail to see it as a sunk cost that, we shouldn't necessarily limit ourselves from changing direction based on the resources that we've put into standardized testing so far. And, the issues in education from a federalism perspective are going to continue. Everybody sees in the news, the issues continue to be persistent. There's talk of charter schools now and vouchers and homeschooling. And of course, vouchers and charter schools have been probably one of the more prominent issues in education lately. And, of course, the authors speak about vouchers as sort of a market-oriented approach to creating competition within schools, and that's, hope that it will improve the condition of schools. But, there are constitutional issues there in terms of the separation of church and state, because, there have been instances where vouchers are diverted into religious institutions and that kind of thing. But I think at the end of the day, what all this shows us is that education, the issue of federalism in education and the push and pull between the federal government, the states, and even local government to that extent, will continue to persist. And there's still going to be a range of various players that are lobbying, and lots of different groups that are interested. And so I think the issue of standardized testing in education is a really interesting area to look at in terms of how the states and the federal government interact with one another.